should have one up there. Good evening and welcome to the 2022 Auburn School Forum, brought to you by Community College and the Citizen. I'm your moderator, Guy Cosentino. On May 17th, voters across the state will be able to go to the polls to vote for their school budgets. In the case of Auburn, there's a $90.2 million budget on the ballot, which is about a 7.7% increase in the budget from the year before. Voters will also go to the polls in Auburn to vote for new school board members from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. You don't have to be a registered voter to vote in this election, but you must be a citizen of the United States, at least 18 years of age, and have lived in the district for prior to 30 days as of May 17th. Voters can go vote at the Auburn Junior High School next door at with former East Middle, Casey Park Elementary, Owasco Elementary, and Seward School. It has been a tradition of the college and the Citizen to bring you forums for all types of candidates, from Congress to City Council, to the county legislature, sheriff, and county treasurer, as well as the school board. 4 seats are up this year. Incumbent William Andre and Jeff Gasper have decided not to run for re-election. Danielle Wood is seeking re-election for a second term. The seat held by Joseph Sheffer, who resigned from the board in October 2021, is also up. And whoever is the fourth place winner in this 5-person race will serve the remainder of his term. We are bringing you this forum with 3 of the 5 candidates who have filed their petitions with the Board of Education and have had them validated by the district. As in the past, the candidates were invited by a letter in a packet to participate when they picked up their petitions at the district. In our studio today are Dan Lovell, James Van Arsdale, and Rachel Chiz, who are all running and have agreed to participate in our hour-long forum. Ms. Wood has declined to participate, and candidate Francis Clarko has notified us that he has a work commitment and cannot participate today. We will introduce you to the candidates with their opening statements in just a moment, but we do want to introduce Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen. You can read his column weekly in The Citizen. He will be asking the questions as he always does, and I think he's been doing this since about 2006 or thereabouts. Our candidates are sitting in the order of their opening statements. They are, again, Dan Lovell, James Van Arsdale, and Rachel Chiz. We want to welcome you. Welcome to the race. As you know, this position is unpaid. Prior to the taping, we asked you, they just notified you of this. Again, a question, that might be the big question. Prior to the taping, we did ask you to draw lots and for your 2-minute opening statements, and then we'll reverse that order at the end. Mr. Boyer can ask questions of any or all of you. We'll just rotate down the line as he asks questions. So we'll start with 2-minute opening statements. Mr. Lovell, welcome.
Hello, Guy. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you to Guy, to Jeremy, and the college. And thank you to my fellow candidates and everyone who's been involved in organizing and presenting this forum. I'm Dan, and I've lived here in Auburn for more than 30 years. My wife Claire and I live here in the city where we're raising our 5 kids. Their ages 3 to 20, and they'll all be products of Auburn schools, just like I was. I'm an IT professional, a small business owner, and a musician here in town. I'm a graduate of Auburn High, Cuba Community College, and Binghamton University. I believe the future success of our city depends on the investments we make in our children, in our school district, and in the talented teachers, administrators, and support staff who make the district work. I'm running because it's time to refocus our attention on the important work of making this district the best it can be, and it's time to ensure our kids are more than prepared for college, trade school, or the workplace. I'm running to help ensure that all students at all levels and all abilities, no matter who they are or what they believe, feel welcome, honored, and valued. I'm running because we can do better. The state and local investments per student in our district are at the bottom in Cuba County, and so is our graduation rate. I believe we can make our district the best in the county, and that starts by listening to our students and teachers about what they need to help them best succeed. It starts by fostering community partnerships, identifying at-risk students, and providing the help they need. I'm running for school board because it's time to put our kids and their futures ahead of the contrived controversies and manufactured scandals we've seen in the last couple of years. I think this work is too important. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. We'll now hear from James Van Arsdale. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I echo Dan's thank yous to the crew here. Great crew at CCC. Been doing this stuff for a long time and bringing a lot of great information to the community. My wife and I have lived in Auburn 30 years or so. Both our daughters, Jennifer and Nicole, graduated from Auburn. And they're out paying their own bills and making a living. So it was a successful trip through the education. My background is, education-wise, I was a Southern Cuba graduate. Grew up in the farm country of Southern Cuba. First attended college down in Florida. Didn't go so well. Went into business. Decided to open a Domino's Pizza franchise in Geneva with some help of some family members. My wife and I did that until we had kids and decided the restaurant business was kind of rough for a family. So I came back to Auburn at that point, and we worked for the Fox family for 15 years and got a lot of practical business experience through both of those experiences. I think would bring an asset to being on the school board. Along the way, about 36 years old, I took my daughter to her first college campus and had that man in the mirror moment and said, I'm not doing what I want to do, and went back to school here at CCC, finished up my associates, and went on to get my bachelor's from Oswego and became a full-time teacher down at Moravia Central School in 2008. And I get to teach fifth graders every day, and it's the best job in the whole world. I've also been very involved in the community through my Perform for Purpose organization that I co-founded with my daughter Jennifer. Also serve on the Tomato Fest board, the Sports for All board, on the Auburn Chamber Orchestra board, and I also am president of my Teachers Association down at school, and been with that for 10 years. I think one of the things that has allowed me to do is to work very closely with administration on important issues. So, in the red.
Thank you, Mr. Van Arsdale. We'll now hear from Rachel Chiz. You'll have 2 minutes as well. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Rachel Chiz, and I'm running for school board. I moved to Auburn 13 years ago with my husband, Joshua. I've been married for 23 years. I have a degree in education from the University of Valley Forge and have spent decades in the classroom myself. My husband and I have 6 kids ranging from 10 years old to 20 years old. Our children are currently in the elementary school, the junior high, the high school here in the Auburn public school system. Our oldest is a junior out of Meyer College and had graduated from Auburn in 2020. I believe that parents, policy, and procedure should have a say, I believe that parents should have a say in their child's education. The role of the school is not to undervalue the role of the parents, their virtues or morals. The role of the school is to give the children of their community an education. And as a board member, I would honor that boundary and create and maintain policies and procedures that honor parents' voice in their child's education. I will continue to stand for ethics and transparency of the board. Parents and caretakers and taxpayers have rights to know exactly what's going on during the meetings of elected officials, and elected officials should be operating in an ethical manner. From the outside, I've helped bring some of those changes this year, and I look forward to doing more from the board seat. I, along with the taxpayers, stand for fiscal responsibility and even further budget sustainability. I'd like to see a budget that can carry itself responsibly into the next year. Like many of us parents, I have a few children with special needs. I fought the journey to receive 504s and IEPs, and I fought to keep those services when I saw a need to. I've walked this journey for 12 plus years, and I believe that all children who need services have the right to receive those full services. I'm honored to stand among those who are in need of them and help fight for them and help the admin reach the goals that they need to provide those teachers.
Thank you. So we'll start with Mr. Boyer asking questions. We have Alicia, who is a second-year student who's going to go to Newhouse from Cayuga in the fall, which we're very proud of. But Mr. Boyer is going to ask questions, and she's going to keep time. She's going to give you 2 minutes for each question. We'll rotate down the row. If you have a follow-up, we'll give you a minute on that, and she'll give you the high sign of when you have half your time's up and then when your time's up. Mr. Boyer, welcome back.
Thank you, and thanks to the three of you for making time out of your day to do this. I know it's not easy when you're balancing families and jobs and actually trying to campaign at the same time, so I appreciate you doing it. And I think I'll start off by just diving into the question that everyone will answer that goes to the polls, and that's on the budget. This year's proposed budget, as Guy had mentioned in his opening, a 7.7% spending increase. That includes a 2.5% increase in the tax levy, which is under the state tax cap, which is 3.18%. There's a lot of additional foundation aid in this available to the state, from the state to the district. That's helped them propose adding about a dozen new positions, and also high school and elementary alternative education programs. So that's my 1-minute synopsis of a $90 million budget. But I'm sure you've all taken a good hard look at it, and I'd like to hear from each of you about how you plan to vote on this proposal and why.
And we'll start with Mr. Lovell and work our way down.
I'll vote for it. I think that we've gone through probably two of the most challenging years in a school I can remember. So those additional positions that you're talking about, additional funding, I think is sorely needed. As I alluded to in my opening, if you take a look at the investments that are made in our kids, both from the local and state sides, they're pretty low compared to what other districts are investing in their kids. A 7% increase sounds like a lot, but I think that we deserve it, and I think it's necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. Mr. Van Arsdale.
Yes, thank you. I intend to vote for the budget too. I think looking at other budgets around the county, it's very comparable as far as what they're being asked the taxpayers to absorb. It is below the 2% formula, so to speak. So there is some balance being made there. Again, as Dan alluded to, I mean, we spend $4,000 to $5,000 less per student in our city than their surrounding districts. So it's money well invested. There's a lot of programs. Ms. Chiz mentioned the need for special needs and that is certainly any more support that we can give our kids. As a 5th grade teacher dealing with 10-year-olds every day, these last 2 years has been a good chunk of their life that have been just turned upside down, and there is a severe need for interventions of all kinds with the children. So,
thank you, Mr. Van Arsdale. Mrs. Chiz, on the budget.
I would vote for it as well, seeing that we're coming out of such a rough season the past 2 years with our kids, and the schools are really struggling with the budget and everything we have to catch up with. If I would have been on the board this past year, though, I would have voiced that with inflation on the rise and with gas and food prices rising, that I would have not preferred to go to the community with a 2.5% tax levy. I think we're using our fund balance appropriately this year with the needs, with the suggested foundation aid due to come in. We could have given the taxpayers a break this year and gone with a lower budget increase.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about sort of the community and board relationship, the back and forth. Towards the end of last fiscal year and in the first few months of this fiscal year, a few meetings got especially heated. One where I think a lot of people remember police were called. That led to some community conversation sessions that the board held, special meetings to try to improve some communication. So my question for all three of you now is, how are we doing now? How is the communication between the board and the community? How well are things working? What more needs to, if anything, needs to change?
Okay. We'll start with Mr. Van Arsdale.
Sure, I think the number one thing for a board member is to be a good listener. Good listener of first the community, the other all stakeholders really. And I think that there were people in the boardroom that didn't feel that way. People in the community that didn't feel that way, and the extra listening sessions I think were important, and I think it's a path that still needs to be traveled, and it's an important. It's back to how it affects the budget too. It's almost harder to choose what to spend money on when you actually have the money you're supposed to get, as opposed to, making cuts. It's a different kind of toughness, but I think that added to the issues also. So.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Chiz, on the issue of community board relationship.
Yes, having attended the board meetings for the past few years, I saw the rise in tension. It has gone down quite a bit. It's not as tension. There's not the tension there now that there was a few months ago. I think that the community was frustrated that they weren't getting answers from the board. I think the board did try to have some sessions where they brought the community in to speak about things, but when asked questions by the community members, the board did not. They chose not to respond. They chose to come with a different agenda and a different angle than what they advertised for. So I think there's still a lot of frustration with the community about the board's transparency, because there's questions that are out there that have been asked over and over again in board meetings that are not being answered. So I think the board could step forward in that way and begin answering some of the questions and help increase the transparency so that the community members and taxpayers are more comfortable with what the decisions that they're making for our children.
Thank you. Mr. Lovell.
I think it's important. First, I'll say it certainly seems that those meetings aren't as contentious as they were. I do take issue with the idea that the community has a problem with this. I think that there's a small segment of the community that had a problem, who threw some accusations out that I don't know that whether they were necessarily fair. But even if they were, I feel like the community or the people in that particular group definitely weren't modeling appropriate behavior for our kids. There are appropriate ways to do things, and there are ways that are not appropriate to do that. I think it's unfair to throw that sort of the blame for that at the board. I think that there was one particular group of people who decided to ramp things up to a point it didn't need to be. Now, in the future, and certainly if I'm on the board, I want us to be as transparent as possible and as open as possible about everything that's going on. But I think that from a community standpoint, we should also take a step back and sort of lower the temperature in the way that we interact with each other.
Okay. Ms. Chiz, you'll have a minute to respond.
Okay, thank you. I think that it's the board's responsibility within a board meeting to control the environment of the room. And I was at those meetings that got contentious, and the board was not in any way trying to control the uprising that was happening. Instead, it was the community people and community leaders that were there that had to step up and take position of the room and bring it back down to where it needed to be. So I definitely think the leadership of the board needs to stand up in leadership. And if something like that arises, they need to be in control of what's happening. They need to be leaders in that situation and not leave it to the people.
Well, Mr. Boyer.
Okay. One issue that's come up as a concern, not just in the past year or so, but over time, it's been an issue in a lot of different schools, and that's how to handle bullying, because it does happen, and it's something that is an important part of how schools try to help kids feel safe and valued and welcomed. So I'd like to ask you, first of all, how do you think the district is doing with that these days? And secondly, off of that, what's the role of the school board when it comes to bullying? Because I've heard a lot of people talk about we got to do more, we got to do better with bullying, and that's on the school board. But what does the school board actually need to do when it comes to that issue?
Okay, we'll start with Mrs. Chiz. You're up first.
Thank you. My first point would be that I believe that the school board right now, currently in the situation they're in, they are leading the bullying in meetings. They are being bullies to the parents that are showing up, the people that are showing up, like what we had talked about before with the contention that's happening. So I believe they're modeling inappropriately for our children currently. Second of all, I believe that the school district is stepping up now to move forward. They created a task force this year that has a lot of members on it, and they're moving along with that. Also, too, they're working on training the teachers in CSI training, which I think it's CSI. It's training where it's de-escalating training for that, so teachers can learn how to manage the rooms better when there are children escalating. And they're getting that across the board. So I think the district itself is doing what it needs to do. I don't necessarily think the problems of the bullying in the school district is a board issue, if that can be said. I've heard a lot in the community that, well, it's happening from the top down. If they're allowed to bully, then why can't the kids do it? But on top of that, I would say that it's more of the admin and the principals in the different buildings to keep their kids against bullying, not for bullying, which they're trying to do, I believe. But it's a problem for sure.
Thank you. Mr. Lovell, 2 minutes on this issue of bullying.
It's in terms of what is the board's place. I think obviously the board sets policy and ensures that our administration is doing what needs to be done. I don't disagree with Rachel as far as the programs and things that are going on right now being steps in the right direction. I think that those are all good positive steps. I know that we can look into things like restorative justice and ways to keep kids so that in a place where they can actually talk to one another. I can tell a story about my own daughter who had an issue at the high school where they did sit them down together. It's two girls who just were having a problem, and they became friends at the end, which was interesting. I didn't think that would happen. But I think there also has to be, for some kids, if they continue that behavior, obviously a hard line should be set as far as what they're, where there has to be a stop put to it at some point. But as far as what the board's role is, I think I would probably agree with Rachel on that.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. Mr. Van Arsdale, on this issue of bullying.
Sure. This has been an ongoing problem, I think, that's been the best way to buy it, social media, and that has played a big part into it. And it's a dilemma at every level, even in an elementary school, how to handle this. I think the role of the board is to set policy, create the training that Rachel's alluded to. Our mental health of our students right now is at an all-time low. They say that 44% of our youth are feeling depressed and sad on a daily basis, according to the CDC. And I think bullying is a big part of that. If a kid is constantly under the stress of, having bad interactions all day, it's going to heighten that. I spoke with a teacher recently who discussed she had kids in her class that would wait in her room until the bell rang and then go to the next room so they didn't have to interact with the bullies in the hallway. So those are the types of things that got to be handled at the school level with the administrators and in the hallways. I mean, it's a big issue.
Okay, Mr. Boyer.
You touched on social media, Mr. Van Arsdale, and I did want to ask you, the three of you, about that because, as a parent myself, I mean, that is a huge challenge in schools right now. It's something that I don't want to assume anyone's age here, but I'm going to assume all four of us were not dealing with that when we were kids in school. Maybe there were other things we were dealing with, but one of the things that really sticks out for me this year was an incident where a huge percentage of the high school stayed home when there was a social media or rumors of a social media threat. And law enforcement even put out a statement ahead of time saying the rumors were unfounded, but parents were still concerned. And it kind of leads to, this broad question, but I'd like to have you each try to take a stab at it. And that is, what are some of the communication parameters districts should establish when it comes to these kinds of situations, when we're dealing with social media rumors, threats of violence, and what districts need to be telling families about what's going on and how they're handling it?
Thank you for including just the four of you. I was papyrus yes, it was papyrus when I was in school. So we communicated. Mr. Lovell, you're up first on this issue of social media.
Jeremy, I'm not really sure what the question was. How should the school be communicating
with
parents?
families when it comes to these social media incidents, rumors, threats. This year there was a lot of concern about a rumor that either was real or not real,
Yeah, I was
and
there.
when and where district says something, and it's tricky because you can't, if you put out an email about every single potential concern, that may get drowned out. But at the same time, you can't say nothing probably.
Right.
So what do you, as board members who are probably going to have these discussions with administrators, what do you think some of the parameters are in figuring that out?
I think you can't go wrong communicating as often as possible. So if you do hear those types of, if you hear of those things on the wind, I think it's probably best to let people know, hey, listen, this has been on the wind. We are aware of it, and we haven't found anything credible. That particular one, my daughter stayed home. She was pretty scared about it, and scared enough at the point where I don't think there was going to be any reassurance she could have gotten that would have made her feel safe going in that day. That said, I think that as these things go on, we're starting to, be better at figuring out which ones of them are obviously, hoaxes, especially when you see them being TikTok trends and so forth. Just kids that are trying to cause trouble. So I think that, I guess the less we know, the better we should be at communicating what we don't know, if that makes sense. Let people know we are investigating this one. We don't have any credible information on it. Doesn't seem to be, something that's a real danger to our kids. And just make sure that our parents are clued in as much as possible.
This issue of social media, Mr. Van Arsdale?
Yes, I thought that the way the districts did handle this particular situation throughout the county was very good. I was involved with my superintendent in my district very early with it, and when we heard about it through rumors from parents, and the first, law enforcement was immediately brought in, and there was a good communication between law enforcement and the district leaderships around the county. I think that's the key, is to working and communicating, as Dan mentioned. You can't over communicate. Robocalls to phones, posts on the social media of the district, websites, whatever. Frankly, I probably would have kept my kids home that day too, because as sure as the law enforcement was, we're just the climate of the entire country right now. Where that unfortunately these are the problems. We used to get under our desk, because Russia was going to bomb us when we were kids, and now we're lining up in the cubbies in the corner, locking the door. Definitely these are issues that have changed, and like I said, over communication, as Dan mentioned. So.
Thank you, Mrs. Chiz, on this issue of social media.
I think transparency is the key. If it proves to be a credible threat, then parents absolutely need to know about it and every detail about it through all the vast ways that Jim had said, through the media, through the email, through the robocalls, through the Facebook, all of it, to be aware of it. I think that's important. But I think they are dealing with these threats often, and there's plenty of times where they're not credible to that point of where it needs to be. Parents need to be informed because, we trust the administration to do what they're doing, the principals to do what they're doing, to, raise it to the attention if it needs to be investigated. So my kids actually chose to go to school that day. They did not have anxiety around it, which I worked with some kids that did have anxiety around it, and absolutely keep them where they are, because it's been such a tumultuous few years for all of our kids. But my kids asked to go to school. They chose to go to school. They trust law enforcement. They trust the administrators. They trust the principals. So, I think just keeping parents informed when it's credible, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Before we go forward with you, Mr. Boyer, I just want to let our audience know that we're halfway through our 2022 Auburn School Board Forum. We have in the studio three of the five candidates who are running for four seats. We'll explain that in just a moment, but that is Dan Lovell. They're sitting in the order that they are speaking. Dan Lovell, James Van Arsdale, and Rachel Chiz. There are four seats open, five candidates. Danielle Wood has decided to decline to participate, and Mr. Calarco, who is running as a first-time candidate, has a work conflict and could not attend. Questions are being asked by Jeremy Boyer of the Citizen, and we'll continue on. Mr. Boyer.
Okay. The next few questions are kind of diving into a little bit of some of the national debate and tension we've seen around public education. I'm going to start it, though, with a pretty general question, and then kind of go from there on some specifics. But it has to do with curriculum, school curriculum. And basically the question is, what role should parents have in the development of school curriculum, and what role should board members have in the development of school curriculum?
Okay. Mr. Van Arsdale, you're up first.
Most of the school curriculum is dictated by the state and the state standards. So it's really how is the district going to meet those needs, and what types of curriculum they're going to use. I feel that the parents should have as much input as anybody. All stakeholders should have an input on a curriculum. The teachers are tasked with a standard to meet. The sixth graders need to know this at the end of sixth graders. Seventh graders need to know this at the end of sixth graders. And the board's job is to make sure that the administrators are developing a curriculum that meets those needs. Support it with data. If you don't have data to support, your desired outcomes, you don't have that to go by. But don't rely just on the data. I think a good curriculum should bring out the creativity that lives inside all the kids. And so that's if a kid leaves my classroom and they're happy and excited about learning, then I did my job that day, and I think that's the role of the school.
Thank you, Mr. Van Arsdale. Mrs. Chiz, on this issue of curriculum and the role of the public.
I think the parents should have a say, should have a voice in their children's education. I think it's a right as a parent to be able to do that. I think with the school district, it's the board, it's their responsibility to, help with the curriculum budget, to provide the money that's needed to provide the adequate curriculum. As Jim had said, in New York State, it comes from the top down, is what our framework is and what we need to follow. So it's the district's responsibility to see that that's done appropriately.
Thank you. Mr. Lovell?
That's a tricky question. I think we've had a whole lot of manufactured controversy in the last couple of years about what the curriculum of school districts have been, and that has given a lot of parents the impression that they should be involved in what their kids are learning at school because they're afraid that they're going to learn things like critical race theory. And we all know, anybody who speaks with teachers, we're not teaching critical race theory to children, but we have parents who show up to school board meetings and yell at people about what are my kids being taught. Most of them are being taught history. And history is a messy business, right? You're not always going to like the things you learn about the United States if you look at our history. It's not the parents' place to decide what the curriculum is. Sure, parents, they should be allowed and given the opportunity to object if there's something terrible that's being taught to their kid. But we pay professionals to come up with, what is the curriculum. As Jim said, most of it is dictated to us by the state anyways. It's our job really to enforce it and make sure it's being taught to the best of the ability of our teachers.
Okay. Anyone want to follow up? All right. Mr. Boyer.
You mentioned critical race theory and how that's become a word or a term used quite a bit in education policy debates. In New York State, there is there is diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and you know, this district is, because the state is telling them to, for one thing, and because I'm sure that many people value it, are working on those, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So my question is, what's your opinion about those kinds of efforts in the school system?
Mr. Lovely, you're up first.
They're essential. I think that we really need to be focused on equity and inclusion. As I said in my opening, I think that school should be a place where everybody feels valued and welcomed. And you know, I've seen all of these debates over the last couple of years, especially whether it's over trans people, trans girls and boys, and the bathrooms they're going to use, and people are worried about that. Everyone should feel valued and welcomed in a school. And that shouldn't change based on, you know, the religious beliefs of one particular segment of the community. They shouldn't be able to dictate to another kid what bathroom they use, for example, or what books they're allowed to read. These are issues that should be, you know, they shouldn't enter a school district. Every kid should be treated well. There should be equity and equality in a school. And whatever effort we could make to bring that about, I would support.
Mr. Van Arsdale, before you go, I do need to make a correction. I skipped you. Mrs. Chiz should have been the first one on this. I will let you do the first question on the next round. I apologize for that. Mr. Van Arsdale.
I would agree wholeheartedly with everything that Dan just mentioned. You know, this question makes me think back to my wife and I's decisions. Where are we going to raise our kids? You know, when we were at that age, or we're going to move to Weedsport, or are we going to move to, you know, another town? And you know, we wanted to stay in Auburn because it was a diverse population in the school. We felt that you know, that was a strong point of the school. So I think that it should be celebrated, and you know, we should make every point we can with our students to emphasize how important that is and what a strength that is in Auburn and in our school, and like I said, celebrate it.
Thank you. Mrs. Chiz.
All children are unique, and I believe that it is important that they are valued for who they are and what their likes are and their dislikes and all of that combined. I think that the diversity, inclusion, and equity stuff that's rolling out right now, I think it's positive. I've seen it roll out this first year. We started last year in July, and I think so far it's been positive. I am raising kids myself from my husband and I are from a few different cultures. I see the need for it. I see the need for acceptance on every level. I see the need for acceptance of diversity for sure in our children. So I think that our school district so far is doing a great job with rolling it out.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Boyer, and the first question, if this is for everyone, goes to Mrs. Chiz.
Okay.
Fairness, so.
Gotcha. Along the lines of that, there was a pretty robust discussion in the school community this year about a book, All Boys Aren't Blue, and whether it was appropriate to be in the high school. And ultimately, it remains in the high school. And I'd like to find out from each of you. I mean, given the attention that it got, I'd like to know if you've read the book, and secondly, would you have voted to remove it or keep it? Why or why not?
Okay. We'll start with Mrs. Chiz.
I did read parts of the book. I did not read the whole thing, but I read parts of it. I am not in favor in any way of banning any books or not allowing any books in our libraries at school. What I am in favor of is for parents to have a say in what their children have access to on certain levels. Like in every avenue of entertainment, there are restrictions placed on what children can access. I believe books should have a similar system in place. It is not an educator's role, though, or the school. I don't believe it's the educator's role or the school's role to override the parent's role in a child's life and in a child's belief system.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lovell.
I would not be in favor of a Tipper Gore style rating system on books. My degree is in literature. I really wholeheartedly believe that, and my wife is a librarian. I tend to believe that libraries should be somewhat subversive. We don't send people to libraries to be indoctrinated with the same sorts of values that we have. Kids should be allowed to go to libraries to learn. And that's to stretch their minds beyond the boundaries that we put on them as parents. Definitely not for banning any books. If a parent has a problem with a particular book they don't want their child to read, they can certainly tell the school district that they don't want them taken out. But boy, let's not start, putting ratings on books.
Mr. Van Arsdale.
I would not have voted to have the book ban. I don't think book banning is a slippery slope. I don't think you go down. I think the district did the right thing. They developed the process, and they had the committee meet and discuss it and make a decision to the board, a recommendation to the board. I understand that. I mean, the library is a volunteer system there. It's not like they were teaching that particular book in any classroom or anything like that. So I think how it all played out was how it should have played out. It was a good discussion, though. I think on both sides of the discussion, I think that it was a good discussion that brought some issues to light that should be brought to light. So,
All right. Thank you, Mr. Boyer.
Okay. One thing that perhaps one of you will be the lucky fourth place finisher in this year's race and pick up that partial term. And my question is about the vacancy and how the district handles board vacancies, because life happens and things, vacancies occur. People have to step down. So there was a discussion in the fall about what to do. They could hold a special election. They could appoint someone to serve until the following spring's election, or they could do what this district did this time, and that's leave the seat empty until the election. What are your thoughts on, what a district should do? Should there be a policy that they should follow to be consistent, or not? And in general, what do you think should be weighed when making that decision about what to do about a vacancy?
Okay, to get back on track, Mr. Van Arsdale, you're first on.
First one. So I know districts have done it differently. As I read about the issue at the time across the board, and I guess there's a lack of a consistent policy, which seems like there should be one. I think it's important. I think it's more important that the voters decide, the community decides, than the board picks somebody. I think that would be, and kind of ultimately is what did happen. So I think that would be important. I think it's an elected position. The community should elect the person. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Van Arsdale. Mrs. Chiz, on this issue of board vacancies.
I believe because there's so many candidates that ran last year, I believe that they should have gone with the voice of the people and just picked the next person in line to fill that vacancy until we rolled around to the election. I sat in the meeting where they were discussing that, and I was very disappointed to hear the board president say, when that was brought to him, like, there's so many that ran, why not just fill the next seat? And he said, well, the community spoke and they don't want the fourth one. And I thought that was a little off to say that, because they did speak and he just was the fourth runner-up. So why wouldn't you go to him? I think they should have went to the fourth runner-up. If he denied it, the fifth runner-up, and then so forth, being that there were 8 different people to choose from for it. So I think I'm in favor, too, of just having a policy written that puts the people in charge of that and not the board in charge of that.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Lovell?
I think the way that this ultimately worked out, I think, is fine. I don't like to have a board seat open for a long period of time, especially so that it works out that there will be a tie. I think that's a bad place to be. I don't like the idea of the runner-up taking that position. It always depends on where you are in that particular term. We don't know where the district is a year from now, so where the voters might have put this person fourth, or fifth in the last election, they might not put that person, in that place now, or maybe the ideas or the reason that person's running aren't relevant a year later. But I agree with Jim. The voters have to speak on that. I think this is the right way to go about it, and we'll fill it up. But I think there has to be a policy, and it's something that has to be followed every time. I know a few years back when there was an opening on the board, the board decided to appoint. They just got to be consistent.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer, you've got time for about 2 more questions.
Okay. One thing that, almost any elected office you're in, there's potential for a conflict of interest to come up in policy that you're discussing and debating. But it's not always easy to define what is a conflict and what is not. And, especially in a small community where, I'm sure all 3 of you, volunteer, work on, nonprofits, perhaps you're on boards, your careers also could be there. So my question as a board member, I guess, is how do you define a conflict for yourself when you're serving on a board, and what steps would you take to manage that conflict so that it doesn't become a problem for you or the board?
Okay. Going back in the rotation, Rachel Chiz, you're up first on this issue of conflicts.
There's actually a piece of paper that comes out that you have to sign stating if you have conflicts or not with the board. This is something I actually was very vocal about last year because I realized that teachers were voting on their spouses' salaries and they were not recusing themselves from it. And there were a couple different other areas where the boards were not recusing themselves at all when I first started observing what was happening. I am happy to say that this past year they have made great strides in that arena. They are recusing themselves when necessary, and we've seen that over and over again when during the different meetings where salaries and summer positions and all that are being pushed through. So I was very happy to see that happening. I think it boils down to your line of ethics and where do your ethics stand. I think it's important to recuse yourself when necessary and take that ethical stand for who you are and what you're putting forth into the community.
Thank you. Mr. Lovell?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult in a small town because we're all connected in one way or the other. It's a funny thing, you walk into Wegmans and you know everybody there. On a board, the important thing is, do I benefit from this? Does a member of my family benefit from this particular discussion personally? Is there a monetary benefit in it? And you just got to step back and get out of it. That's really it.
Okay. Mr. Van Arsdale.
Yes, thank you. I would agree with both sentiments stated. I think it speaks to the culture of a school district that its transparency is important, and I think that with a board member, anytime that there is anything that would be maybe ethically questioned for whether it's proper or not, or if I have family that work in the district, so if that was something before the board that was good or bad for them, I would recuse myself. It would just. And I think it's an important step that in a small community, as mentioned, that those that we hold everyone to that standard. So.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer. Last question.
All right. Well, which way should we go with this? I guess the question I'll ask the 3 of you is, if you win this election. One of the first decisions you're going to need to make is who do you want to be board president in the next school year and the next fiscal year. So given who's on the board now and who you're running against here, who do you see yourself supporting? It could be yourself too, if you want to say, I want to be board president.
Mr. Lovell.
I think Ian's done a really good job. I like Ian. If he decides to continue, I would support him. I like Jim. I like Jim a whole lot. Sorry, I didn't put you on the spot, but I like Jim a lot. I I think that Danielle Wood has done a great job on the board. She's a really hard worker. So I don't know, who will be interested in it, but I think that we have several good candidates.
Okay. Mr. Van Arsdale?
Not a question I've thought about at all yet, just for about 15 seconds now. The one thing about the board currently, and I think all the candidates that are running for the board are very experienced in a lot of the issues that are come before the board. So I don't know that there's anybody that I wouldn't support. So I think those are conversations for down the road. But I think Auburn has a very, the board members take the job very seriously. I've talked to them a lot, and they're very informed on the issues, and I think we're lucky to have the board members that have served for so long on the board and know the issues inside and out. So that's how I feel right now.
Thank you. Mrs. Chiz?
I think it's too early to tell. I feel like it's too early to make a decision like this, not even knowing who's going to be sitting on the board. I will say that I'm not in favor right now of the leadership that's running the board, because I feel like there's bullying tactics going on, and there's different things going on that don't appear to me to be transparent or ethical. So I would say that I would like to see a change in the leadership on the board for the safety of our schools, and to better benefit our children and their education. But I don't feel like I'm ready to name who I want to be president yet.
Okay. Thank you. Before we turn to closing statements, and we'll go in reverse order, I do want to take the time to thank Mr. Boyer for his thoughtful questions. He's been doing this for more than a decade and a half, and we appreciate you coming in the studio. We like you better in the studio, by the way, and doing it by Zoom when we've had to, as we have over the last 2 years. But thank you and the citizen for your support of this effort to get the candidates' voices out in the community. We'll now turn to our closing statements. Rachel Chiz is going to be first. She has 2 minutes for her closing statement.
Thank you. As I stated earlier, I'm first and foremost a parent. 2 of our children have graduated from Auburn already, but I still have 4 more on this journey. I believe firmly that parents have a right to have a say, a voice in their children's education. This past year and a half, a group of us parents had been addressing the unethical practices of the board. As a result, we've seen them change their practices and start meetings according to proper procedure, properly announcing meetings, beginning publicly and announcing when and why they were going into executive session. We asked for transparency, and although they have not reached the transparency we parents are asking for, we do feel like they've made great strides in that direction. If I get elected, I would like to lead ethically by furthering the journey of the following of open meeting laws. I would also bring more transparency to the board. I'm a parent first, and I believe that parents have a right to be an active part in their children's education. I will not play the political games that are currently being played, and I will keep the focus on the kids in every decision that I make. School board should be about our community's children and their rights to an education. Also, I'm a parent that has navigated special education for over 12 years, and I believe the pathway to it should be clear, and will advocate for families and teachers and administration for the needs of our children being met. I've chosen to run for the board because I'm a concerned parent representing concerned parents and caregivers who believe in their right to be a voice in their children's education.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Mr. Ben Arsdale.
So it's a mix of life and professional experiences that give me the desire to serve as a board member for the Auburn Large School District. I've been committed to doing my best in our community to help provide as many positive and uplifting experiences for all youth. I believe our school system plays a vital role in creating these opportunities. Our schools are the community's biggest financial and human investment that we make together. The number one priority for any school district is to continue to ensure the best possible education for all students in that community. To create as many academic paths, training in the trade opportunities, and extracurricular experiences possible. With this goal in mind, 3 main factors contribute to success in this area. Fair school funding levels, attracting, supporting, and keeping the best staff, and responding to the social and emotional needs of the school community. First, I believe fair funding levels from the state and the federal government are critical. Historically, Auburn has operated in an underfunded situation compared to the other districts in the county. Trends have forced Auburn to operate with $4,000 to $5,000 less per student than surrounding districts, yet meet the same level of challenges. Secondly, I believe the school board's role in developing policies that attract the best administrative personnel, teachers, and professional support staff. Every organization has a culture that either attracts or repels the best people, and district leadership starts at district leadership. Thirdly, I believe the school district should be strong in listening and assessing the needs of our students' social emotional needs. As a fifth grade teacher working with students daily, listening to our parents and other school professionals, we clearly have a mental health crisis like we've never seen before due to the years of COVID and other issues. So these are priorities I feel for me running, and I hope that you'll choose to elect me. And there's my bell.
Thank you, Mr. Van Arsdale.
Right on the money.
Mr. Lovell.
I want to thank all of you guys for being here again. Guy, Jeremy, really good to see both of you again, and the whole crew here. You guys have been great. And thank you to Rachel and Jim as well. A little bit. I'm just going to take a minute instead to say that over the past several weeks, I've spent some time with Jim and with Danielle Wood and CJ Clarko. We don't sit around and talk about like policy. But we've shared with each other the concerns that we have about the district, about the students, about what they're going to learn. And we've all shared with each other the respect and admiration that we have for our teachers who have gone above and beyond in these past couple of years. We share this vision of where the district can be in just a few short years. I really admire Jim's work with Perform for Purpose and throughout the community. CJ, I'm sorry he's not here, but he's got a great sense of humor and a really level head. And he knows just like Jim does, what it's like to be in a classroom and work with kids. Danielle's been an effective and hardworking board member. She's instantly helpful and welcoming. She makes a really good batch of chocolate chip cookies. And this is a group of people I'm really proud to run alongside. It's a group that I know that would be effective at steering the school in the direction. And I hope that you agree when you head to the polls. I really appreciate the time that I've had to speak with voters throughout the district. I appreciate all the feedback that I've received from parents and from homeowners. And I've learned a lot. I'm prepared to tackle this hard work that's ahead of us, and I hope that you're going to trust me with your vote on May 17th. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you to all three of you for running. We know it's not always easy, but it's important to our community, and we thank you for doing that. A couple of other quick thank yous. We want to thank Michelle Shelley Major of the Auburn School District, who is always helpful with these forums, getting us the names, getting out the invitations to the candidates. We can't thank her enough. Her help has been invaluable, and we appreciate everything she does to make these forums work. We also want to thank you for taking the time to listen over the last hour to the candidates and urge you to go vote on May 17th. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You can vote at the junior high, at Casey Park, Owasco, and Seward schools. And we will be back in a couple of months, hopefully, with both Inside Government and Beyond the Front Page and a series of congressional and Assembly and Senate district forums, depending on what those districts look like after the judges get done with them. Before we do depart, I would like to say a quick thank you to the students here at the college as they head into finals. We wish them good luck. For those who are graduating, we wish them great success. And for those who are continuing with us, we hope to see them again in the studio working in the telecom division. We want to thank Steve Keeler, who does a wonderful job with this program, Mike Morano, Doug Brill, and of course, Jeff Sesniak, who between this show and the radio station makes this program work. On behalf of KU Community College and the Citizen, I want to thank you for watching. Again, urge you to go out on May 17th to vote. Have a good night. Have a great tomorrow. Get vaccinated. Get boosted. Wear a mask. But more than anything else, be safe.